Hey, over here. Hi. We've got 3 books today. We've got one. It's a book about books and a book about rabbits and friends called Bunny's Book Club. That's Bunny. And we have another book about animals and a cranky old man called Those Darn Squirrels. And finally, we'll look back to the Boxcar Children, which we haven't done in a couple of weeks. So hopefully you'll remember some of the things that happen in the book. But if you don't, that's okay. It's still a good story. Here we go. Are you ready? Are you comfortable? I'm ready. I'm not comfortable, but that's not your fault. Here we go. Bunny Book Club. Do you know what this is? Have you ever seen one of these in a book before? When I used to check out a library book when I was a kid, every book would have a card like this. And then you'd bring the book to the librarian, and she'd pull out this card, and you write your name next to it, and then she'd stamp it with a date. And then she'd keep that card. And then when you return the book, she'd put the card back in the book, put the book back on the shelves, and you had a list of everybody who looked at the book, who borrowed the book before. It was kind of cool. They don't do that anymore. So you can see, first, Bunny checked it out, and then Bear, and then Porcupine, and then I think that says Raccoon checked it out. Bunny's Book Club. Words by Annie Silvestro and pictures by Tatiana May Weiss. And there's Bunny. That's a cute bunny. Bunny loved books. Do you see Bunny? Right there. He'd loved them ever since he first heard the lady with the red glasses reading out loud outside the library. As he listened, Bunny imagined himself climbing mountains, captaining a ship, ruling a kingdom. But when summer ended, story time moved back inside. Bunny wasn't sure if animals were allowed in the library, but Bunny was sure he couldn't live without books. Do you see Bunny even though he's not in the library? Can you find him? Look, he's looking through the window. Night after night, he could hardly sleep for wishing. He had to do something. So, with a flashlight in his paws and hope in his heart, Bunny jumped out of bed and tiptoed through the dark. Where do you think he's going? He's already home. He's not going back home. But when he reached the library door, it was locked. So were the windows. Bunny tried digging, climbing, and yanking. Nothing worked. Can't get into the library because the library's closed, Bunny. Until finally he noticed. The book returned. The shiny handle was far above his head, but it was no match for a high-hopping bunny hungry for books. Bunny leapt. He clung to the bar, flung himself over, and wiggled his cottontail through the slot. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. He landed inside with a thud. Gotta make sure I got the right page. All right. He's inside the library at night. Oh my goodness. He's not allowed to do that. No one's allowed to do that. It's closed. Bunny's eyes sparkled at the sight of the shelves bursting with books. Look at all those books. It was better than a field full of fresh, crunchy carrots, which for a bunny rabbit is pretty good. Bunny didn't know where to start. He took a deep breath. It smelled as if he were wrapped inside the pages of his favorite book. He followed his nose to the adventure section. There he found stories about swashbucklers, sharks, and superheroes. Bunny greedily gathered them all. His whiskers twitching with excitement, he slipped his treasures through the book slot, one by one. Then, performing his best balancing act, Bunny wobbled home. He couldn't wait to dig in. And so Bunny returned to the library. Each night he searched and sneaked and scurried back to read. Soon his home was more books than burrow. Then one evening a loud knock startled Bunny. He closed his book and opened the door. "Where have you been?" asked Porcupine. "Reading," said Bunny. "Why?" said Porcupine. Bunny's eyes popped wide open. "Why?" he sputtered. "Have you ever been to the library?" It was time for Bunny to let Porcupine in on his secret. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" said Porcupine. "Calm your quills," said Bunny. "I'm too prickly. I'll never fit." Bunny pushed and shoved until pop went Porcupine. Bunny slipped in and flipped on his flashlight. "Whoa," said Porcupine. "I know," said Bunny. "Do you think there's a story about balloons? I've always wondered about balloons." "Most definitely." Sure enough, Porcupine found books on balloons and on deserts and dunes and caterpillars and cocoons. When Bunny handed him one about hedgehogs, he hugged it. The two friends took turns cramming books out the slot. The towers teetered so high they could barely carry them. Back at Bunny's, they cozied up with cups of tea and carrot muffins. Together they read until sunrise. One night, Bear noticed the light on at Bunny's. He opened the door and tripped over a stack of books. "What's going on?" said Bear. "Here," said Bunny, handing him a book. Bear made room and settled in to read. He squished his big bottom between Bunny and Porcupine. Soon more curious animals began visiting. "Do you have birds about space?" said Bird. "Or about volcanoes," said Mole. "I'd like a ghost story," said Mouse. "I think it's time for a field trip," said Bunny. "A field trip? Where do you think they're going to go?" One by one, the animals stuffed themselves inside the library. Bear caused a bit of a delay. Look how big he is. They scattered about, sniffing the stacks, pawing over pages. Squirrel gathered stories about the circus. Raccoon nabbed one about outlaws and bandits. Frog found a fairy tale. No one heard the key in the front door. No one heard the clack, clack, clacking of footsteps. No one heard the light flick on. Uh-oh, who's there? Click! "What do we have here?" said the librarian. The animals looked up in shock. Bunny gasped. Porcupine gaped. Bear groaned. "Follow me," she said. The animals marched slowly behind her. "We're done for," whispered Porcupine. All libraries have rules, said the librarian sternly. Bunny's whiskers trembled. Porcupine's back bristled. Bear eyed the door. Bunny stepped forward to take the blame. The librarian leaned down. The first rule is every book lover must have one of these. She handed Bunny and his friends shiny new library cards. Now you may borrow books, she said, smiling, as long as you return them, of course. Bunny couldn't believe his ears. They could keep coming to the library. He beamed at his fellow readers, then bounced to the shelves. He picked the perfect book, and he proudly checked out the very first official selection for Bunny's Book Club. They all have their books, and they have tea and a roaring fire and carrots and cupcakes. I don't need cupcakes to read books, but I wouldn't say no to a cupcake. The end of Bunny's Book Club. Next is a grumpy old man called Those Darn Squirrels! Words by Adam Robin and pictures by Daniel Salmieri. There's an angry man and an angry bird, but not that kind of angry bird. And the squirrels, what are the squirrels doing? They're climbing the tree. And they're eating from, they look like bird feeders. Uh-oh, those are bird feeders, not squirrel feeders. I bet I know why they're angry. Those darn squirrels! Well, those are pretty paintings of all those birds. I wonder who makes all those paintings. On the outskirts of town, at the edge of the forest, there was a little old house. The only thing older than the little house was the man who lived in it, Old Man Fookwire. Old Man Fookwire was so old that when he sneezed, dust came out. He was also a grump. He hated pie. He hated puppies. The only thing he liked was birds. All summer long, the old man painted pictures of the birds that visited his backyard. There were whirlybirds and bonga birds, baba birds and yaba birds. Even a rare flugel bird came by once or twice. Fookwire's paintings weren't very good, but the birds never said anything. When the air turned crisp and the leaves began to change color, the old man grew sad. He knew that soon the birds would fly south for the winter, as they did every year, and that he would be lonely. Then he had an idea. If he fed the birds, maybe they would stick around. So Old Man Fookwire built beautiful bird feeders and put them up all around in his backyard. He filled the feeders with delicious seeds and berries, and soon the birds came from all over the forest just to eat in the old man's yard. That's very nice of him. But the birds weren't the only ones who liked the bird feeders. The squirrels did too. Not many people know this, but squirrels are the cleverest of all the woodland creatures. In fact, they're fuzzy little geniuses. They can make a house out of a tree, a bed out of a bunch of leaves, and a box kite out of twigs, dirt, and squirrel spit. They are also excellent at math. Winter was fast approaching, and the squirrels needed to gather as much food as they could to get ready. So they decided to take some of the bird food. The birds were not happy. Neither was Old Man Fookwire. When he discovered what had happened, he shook his old man fist and yelled, "Those darn squirrels!" Look, they knocked the bird feeders down, and they took all the bird seed. I think I'd be kind of angry, too. He filled up the feeders again, but this time he hung them from a clothesline. Then he went back inside, confident that the squirrels would no longer be able to get the seeds and berries. Do you think clever squirrels wouldn't be able to beat a little clothesline? Come on, Old Man Fookwire. But the squirrels were determined. They devised a plan, and this time they took all the food from the bird feeders. The birds were furious. Yelled a bonga bird. Those darn squirrels! Yelled Old Man Fookwire. Yum! Said the squirrels. Look how fat they got off the food. Now it was Old Man Fookwire's turn to devise a plan. He went to the general store to get supplies. He bought lasers and clamps. He bought wires and springs. He bought all sorts of tools and built a veritable fortress around his bird feeders. Then he refilled them very carefully. Look at all the traps. He's got lasers shooting up there. He's got gears and clamps and a boot and mouse traps and a cake for bait and a trash can lid upside down. Na 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 na, snorted the flugel bird. The squirrels stayed up all night working out their strategy. They drank cherry cola and ate salt and vinegar chips to help them stay awake. Finally, they had it. The perfect plan. They put on their tiny helmets and prepared to launch themselves into the air, over the fence, between the lasers, and onto the bird feeders. You see their plan? Drop the ball, launch the squirrel onto the bird feeders. The first squirrel misfired and hit a tree. The second squirrel went too high and landed in a bucket. The third squirrel sailed clear over the house. The birds laughed and laughed. They each had one last delicious mouthful of seeds and berries from the old man's feeders. Then they flew south for the winter, just as they did every year. Said the flugel bird. After the birds left, Old Man Fookwire was lonely, just as he was every year. He fixed himself some cottage cheese and pepper, his favorite snack. But he was still lonely. When he looked out the window, the squirrels could tell that he wasn't happy. "Go away!" shouted the old man. "I don't like you squirrels!" The squirrels held a meeting deep inside a large tree. They decided to give the old man a present to make up for taking the seeds and berries. Now, not many people know this, but squirrels are not only fuzzy little ingeniuses, they also collect just about anything they find on the ground. These squirrels had a vast stockpile of spectacular junk to choose from. But what would Fookwire like? Bottle caps, popsicle sticks, postage stamps? Finally, they had it. The perfect gift. The squirrels stacked all of their loose change on old Fookwire's doorstep. There were dimes and pennies, there were nickels and quarters, there were even a few tokens from Coco's arcade. It all added up to $47.36, plus a few rounds of skee-ball. "Maybe you squirrels aren't so bad," Fookwire said when he found the coins. "But I still like birds better." This gave the squirrels another idea. They raided their junk collection again and got to work. When Old Man Fookwire woke up the next morning, he was amazed to see that the birds had returned. Look at all those birds. Do you see all those colorful birds? Well, wait a minute. Those things weren't birds. They were squirrels in disguise. "Great googly moogly," said Old Man Fookwire. "This will make quite a painting." He ran outside and took down the lasers and wires and spring-loaded trapeze. He turned all the bird feeders into squirrel feeders. Then he painted until his brush ran out of bristles. The squirrels were so overjoyed they had a party in Old Man Fookwire's house. "Those darn squirrels," said Fookwire, and shook his old man fist and smiled. The end. Those darn squirrels weren't so bad, were they? All right, let's see where we were with the Boxcar Children, because I don't even remember what happened the last time. Let's go find out. All right, so the last chapter we read was chapter 8. Oh, and this was the one where they built a swimming pool. Do you remember that? They had a small pond, and they blocked the stream with rocks and wood and made a swimming pool. And then they made a stew. This chapter is called Fun in the Cherry Orchard. And there's the picture of the cherry orchard. The next morning, Henry thought and thought about taking the other children to pick cherries with him. At last he told his sisters about it as they ate bread and milk for breakfast. Dr. Moore said he wanted more children to help. Do you think all of us ought to go, Jessie? Well, said Jessie, I don't know. You see, there are 4 of us. If Grandfather's looking for us, it would be easier to see 4 than 1. Yes, that's so, answered Henry. But we can go down the hill and through the streets 2 by 2. I'll take Benny and go ahead. Then in a little while you and Violet can come with the dog. Good, said Jessie. Watch can tell you where to go. The children took down the clothesline and shut the car of the door. Nope. Shut the door of the car. Everything was in order. Then they started out. When they arrived at the orchard, they soon saw that they were not the only workers. The doctor was there, and the cook, and the 2 men carrying ladders and baskets. Good morning, Henry, said Mrs. Moore. Can you work today? Oh, yes, said Henry. These are my sisters, Jessie and Violet. They can pick cherries, too. Benny is too young to climb trees, but we had to bring him. Maybe he can carry baskets, said Dr. Moore, smiling at Benny. You see, this is a big cherry year, and we have to work fast once we begin. Maybe he can help fill the little baskets from the big ones. Eat all you want, said Mrs. Moore. The cherries are beautiful this year. The children didn't eat all they wanted, but every now and then a big red cherry went into someone's mouth. Henry and the girls went up the ladders and began to pick cherries. Watch barked for a while. He did not like to have Jessie climbing the ladder. Then he sat down and looked up at her in the tree. Benny hurried here and there, carrying the baskets to the pickers and eating all the cherries he wanted. Everyone in the orchard liked Benny. The doctor laughed delightedly at him, and sweet Mrs. Moore fell in love with him at once. By and by he sat down beside her and carefully filled small baskets with cherries from the big baskets. The men laughed at the funny things Benny said, and Watch barked happily. By and by the doctor left the orchard to make some calls. At last Mrs. Moore said, I never had such happy cherry pickers before. You are having such a good time out there that I don't want to go in the house. She smiled. Mary, the cook, seemed to think the same thing, for she came again and again into the orchard. After a while, the cook went in to get dinner, but the children still picked cherries. At noon, Dr. Moore came home. You must stay to dinner, he said to the children. We can eat here in the orchard under the trees. Will your mother be watching for you? When he asked this, he looked at Henry in a queer way. Henry did not know what to say. But at last Jessie said, No, our mother and father are dead. Then you must stay, said Mrs. Moore. Here comes Mary. The cook put a table under the trees, and they all sat around it and ate a delicious dinner. Then Mary went into the house and came out again with big bowls of cherry dumplings. I can smell something good, cried Benny. Is it cherries? Yes, my little dear, said Mary. Cherry dumplings. Cherries are cooked in the dumplings. Benny ate his cherry dumpling and then went to sleep with the dog for a pillow. But Henry and Jessie and Violet began to work again. Mrs. Moore looked out the window at them. Just see how those children work, she said to Dr. Moore. And they are so polite, too. I wonder who they are. Dr. Moore said nothing. After a while, he went out to the orchard. You've worked long enough, he said. He gave them $4 and all the cherries they could carry. That is too much, said Henry. No, said Dr. Moore, it is just right. You see, you are better than most workers because you are so happy. Come again. I'll come every day, said Benny. They all laughed. Dr. Moore saw that the children did not leave the orchard at the same time, but started down the street 2 by 2. I wish I knew who they are, he said to himself. When the cherry pickers got back to their little home, they looked everything over carefully, but things were just as they had left them. The door was still closed, and the milk and the butter were in the refrigerator. The children made a happy supper of bread and butter and cherries, and then went to bed in the boxcar. That same night, Dr. Moore sat reading the paper. All at once, he saw the word lost, and he began to read. Lost, 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls, somewhere around Greenfield or Silver City. $5,000 to anyone who can find them. James Henry Alden. That's their grandparent. That's their granddad. Dr. Moore sat up. $5,000, he said. James Henry Alden. Oh my, oh my. He sat still for a long time, thinking and laughing to himself. The 4 children are living in a boxcar, but I shall not tell Mr. Alden that they are his grandchildren, he said. We'll have to find out why next time, because that's the end of the chapter. The next chapter is Chapter 10, Henry and the Free-for-All, which looks like a race to me. But that's next time. For now, we have to say goodbye. Sing our song together. Get your fingers ready. Practice waving. Stick out your fist. Stick out your pointer. Stick out your pinky. Stick out your thumb. And this means I love you. 'Cause I do. Ready to sing? Here we go. I love you. Goodbye. I love you. Goodbye. I love you. I love you. I love you. Goodbye. Goodbye. I'll see you next time.